the world, and we understand that family is a part of how the world should move.
Right.
And without the direction from God through the man, yes, it could miss the mark. But at the same time, the man can disconnect that mark and what God is bringing. So for the purpose of it is really a generalization of the connection that we understand God through man can move things in a way that God understands how the world should be shifting.
Right.
So that when the direction is given and the orders are given and the way and the will of God is given to the man, who should always figure out how to connect to God, it has to be generalized to the family and again through the wife, or even if the man is not even married. Let's make sure we tackle that concept. That it still has to be his purpose, his mission to deliver what God is saying to him about the way family should move.
So I have a question for you. Is every man's purpose the same, or is it generally different per man? I'm asking that because, and I'm going to answer my own question. Yes, the purpose for a man is the same, is to bring the godliness into his family, the structure of God, the connection of God, but his assignment may be different per person. Can you speak on that for me?
Yeah, that's even to the purpose and concept and understanding when it comes to gifts. We all have our specific gifts, and those gifts are again generalized in concept and presented to the way that we are to direct our gifts into the world and with the world and about the world. So when you talk about the purpose, yeah, it's definitely the same thought in a sense, but the avenue in which that man should travel is based on the direction that God has given him. So again, gifts. And I think that's a part of that. We always talk about, speaking in tongues or laying hands and all of that, and even preaching and teaching, and, we can go with those thoughts. But a gift can also be how you direct.
Right.
How you manage. Right. So, of course, I can be a leader. That don't mean I have to be the same leader that you are.
Right.
I can be a preacher. That doesn't mean I have to be the same preacher that you are.
Right.
And that's where I think the world and men get it mixed up, because we so focused on, hey,
title.
It's good. It's good that he's doing it that way, and I don't do it that way. So maybe I should do it because it's not always working for me.
Right.
But the thing is that we need to look at how we're operating.
Right.
And even again with gifts, how we are operating in our gifts. But again, it still connect to the purpose. And no, it's definitely not, it's the same, but it's not the same avenue. I'll say same lane.
So I'll throw something out there to you. Let's look at Adam, and God made Adam and Eve in his likeness. He gave Adam assignment. Where did Adam make the mistake with Eve, with that whole situation? Did he disconnect from God? Did he yield to his wife? I mean, we know he yielded to his wife, but where could we say Adam made a mistake because he had the direction before Eve came? He knew the assignment. He knew his purpose. Can we subjectively say where he made a mistake?
That's an argument that we can always have.
Right. I mean, well, it's...
And I say that because we can say, okay, did the enemy trick the weakest one?
We can say that.
But then we can also say he knew the strongest one, depending on where Adam was.
Right.
In his walk with God at that time.
Right.
So when we look at that, if we want to say, or even place the argument of where he went wrong, we can't say that there was a wrong turn, but we can say that there was a moment that he was not connected.
Right.
And we know what that feels like, because we've been through our world and know that, hey, there was a disconnect, and even still, I can say, there's a disconnect because of how I'm operating, and then we go back to the flesh. And I've just recently, really paid attention for myself that although we are, living in this world and we have our flesh, that we are still spiritual beings. But the thing is that we have to realize that we are not operating always in our spiritual being.
Right.
That we keep wearing the clothes, and I'm talking about our skin, our flesh.
Right.
And we're allowing our flesh and society to dictate how we operate our spirits.
Right.
And when we realize that we are to do the opposite, allow our spirits to dictate how our flesh operates.
So that was the goal of Jesus, to show us how to operate in the spirit and not the flesh.
Exactly.
We had a conversation last week, and we were talking about chaos that's in a man's life. We were really dealing with David and the man of God that he was, but also the failures in some of the things that he did because he was in the flesh.
Right.
And we talked about how there was a disconnect, or there is a disconnect when there's total chaos in your life. And when I went back and went over the podcast and I re-listened to it, I want to make a statement. You don't always have chaos in your life just because you're disconnected. Sometimes chaos comes in because you may have the gift of bringing calmness in a chaotic situation. God may be orchestrating some stuff to get you in line or get you closer to him. One thing I understand is when situations happen, it's always to take us closer in relationship with God. Usually when calamity happens, we in the flesh, we walk away from God or we blame God. But what God is really saying is, I'm trying to bring you closer to me, and I'm using these things to bring you closer.
To get your attention again.
To get your attention again.
Sometimes you need that chaos or something. You don't want to say bad happens, but some situations you have nobody else to turn to.
Right.
And he wants to create that situation where you're looking back at him and saying, hey, I can't even handle this.
And you said it 2 weeks ago. I'm in relationship with God, and I like when God takes me down because he brings me right back up. And I think that's a concept as men, and we need to understand that every challenge is not to challenge or break down who you are as a man.
Right.
It's really there to build you up as a man spiritually and then in the flesh.
Right.
That way, if we walk in the spirit, we overcome the things in the flesh. And so I want to have a conversation about, who do we say? We said Joshua?
Yeah, Joshua.
And Jonah.
Jonah
had an assignment.
But I also want to, something that you said, and that brings me also to the Job story.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because we always look at the tragedies and the things that Job went through. But if you go back to the beginning of that story, what actually took place?
The conversation. Right.
So, and I dive into that enough because I actually preached on it. And the title of my sermon, if I'm correct, was, Can God trust your faith in him when the attack comes?
Right.
And I say that because we don't pay attention to the conversation.
Right.
We pay attention to, oh, he went through, he lost, and then we say, oh, he was blessed, double for his trouble. But the thing is that the conversation had to be had in order for the enemy to even have the ability to even come after him. So we can look at, God is definitely orchestrating chaos in the sense of getting us to be in alignment to him, yes. But in Job's case, I see it where he used Job 1 to prove double that I still have the upper hand no matter what.
Right.
But at the same time, he used Job to show the world that no matter what it looks like, feels like, and sounds like, you still have enough in me and you to walk this thing through with understanding faith is the process. So we have to always say, and I'm at that moment in my life where I'm okay with when it comes.
Right.
Because I go, okay, thank you, God, for talking about me.
Right.
And when I do that, it puts me in a different perspective of what's happening and how I get through it, because I'm saying God must have had some idea that I knew how to get through this process for this to even come my way.
So it's not personal, but it is personal.
It's not personal. It's not. Actually, it's never personal.
It's never personal. It's
and
spiritual.
That's the thing. We keep
we take it on.
We take on it, but it's because of the spiritual ride of it that we can't see it as a personal attack. We have to see it as a spiritual warfare. But the spiritual warfare is never ours either.
Right, it's the Lord.
So and that's another thing that we take on personally. We take on, I'm in the battle. Yeah, you are, but you're not fighting this battle.
It's already won.
So for men out there, based off what Minister Carlton said, and you have to go and read the book of Job. It is a big book. I read the book in 2 days. There's a conversation that God has with the enemy about the faith of Job. And the conversation was God, from Satan to God, I will get him to curse you, in a nutshell. And God said, have you not seen my servant Job? God already knew what he put in Job.
Right.
So the test, watch this, the test, Job was already tested. God knew he was going to pass the test.
Exactly.
It was now an assignment.
It's an assignment. I was going to, yes. Yeah. That's
so,
what it is.
So men, if for the men out there who's listening to this conversation, you may be going through something because God is trying to bring the assignment out of you.
Exactly.
Yep. He's trying to show you what's in you, because what Job had seen in his life prior to everything, the calamities that came, he had never seen what he saw after those few days.
Exactly.
And so what did God do? God had already prepared him. Now the problem is, or the challenge is how do I stay in relationship with God while I'm going through?
Why me?
Yeah. Right.
Why you choose me, God?
So Job had an assignment. Joseph had an assignment. Joshua had an assignment. Jonah's assignment. We have to talk about the assignment, and when God gives it, what happens when you don't want to fulfill it.
It's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Jonah was a prophet of God. He was told by God to prophesy to a land. He did not want to do it. Subsequently, he got swallowed by a fish. The Bible says he stayed there for 3 days, and then the fish spit him out. The detour, and God will detour you if you're not operating in your assignment, what God has called you to do. So it goes back to the man of today. What is the assignment for a man today? What is the purpose of him being in relationship with God? Last week, what did we talk about? Well, I'll come back to that. If there's anybody who has a comment or want to call in, or you want to reach out to us, you can reach us at menofpromise2018@gmail.com, or you can reach us at 470-412-0917. The purpose of a man, we were talking, our conversation had an undertone of churches and the relationship between the church and God today. 2 weeks ago, we had a deep conversation about a minister, and I will not bring his name up again. He made a very bold statement in the pulpit where he said, you want to make the statement?
You can make it. You may say it better than I.
There's
what I'm thinking.
There's an Atlanta preacher, and his comment in the pulpit was, Jesus was wrong 85% of the time he walked on this earth in his divine DNA.
There it is. Divine DNA.
Now, we have to understand where the church goes is a direct reflection of God's relationship with man. Because if man is God's structure, if man is God's leader of the church, and the church is making statements like that, where's the church going? So the word divine, the word divine means godly. Jesus being born of a virgin.
No fault. Yeah.
No fault. He was not born into sin.
Exactly.
how do you operate divinely in your DNA, your makeup, and be wrong 85% of the time? It's impossible.
I think it's impossible.
It's about as possible as me walking on water.
Right. Exactly.
So our conversation has really been going where the relationship with man goes, so goes the church, so goes the neighborhood, so goes the family.
Yep.
And as we can see, our family structure is in a lot of places out of control. Yep. So we as men need to get back in relationship with God, right relationship, that we could be the right leaders and not make the same mistakes as our biblical heroes.
Right.
Adam, Moses. We talked about Moses. God saying, hey, I want you to lead the children of Israel out. What's the first thing he did? He looked at himself. He said, I'm not a good speaker.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But a lot of that has to do with identity too. And when Carlton was talking earlier, and he was talking about people having different gifts, you know, we as humans naturally copy, you know, we imitate what we see. And so you have a lot of men, in my opinion, from the time that they're young boys, they imitate their fathers, they imitate their grandfathers or other men that they see. So if you don't have a good example in front of you of what it truly means to be a real man or a man of God or a God-fearing man, then you're going to imitate maybe the wrong persona of what it means to be a man. And that's why it's so important, in my opinion, that men, you know, as soon as they are able to understand identity and a relationship with God, that they really seek God for who God has called them to be and find their own identity, because it's not always in the people that you have seen growing up.
Right. Well, and biblically, your identity came from your father. If your father was a sheep herder, then what did you do? You were a sheep herder.
Yeah.
David was a sheep herder. His father had a farm. David's gift was he was a flock. He led the sheep. He protected the sheep.
Right.
There's stories about him killing bears. Was that significant of him killing a giant? Was the bear bigger than him? You understand what I'm saying?
But he also became a king.
Right.
Which was, you know, God's identity for him, his ultimate identity.
His assignment.
His assignment.
So there's still something key, and I want to pull that out, is that knowing their assignment, right? They still had to know God first. You still had to get in there. You got to be seeking him. And that goes with everybody for knowing what your assignment is. Otherwise, you don't know what your assignment is.
And so you're out there constantly failing.
Yeah.
Attempting to do what you want to do in your flesh.
Trying to find it.
Trying to find it.
Exactly.
So men out there, it's important that you develop your relationship with God. We're going to talk about leadership and the leadership that a man has in his life. We talked about it a little bit, but we're going to do a podcast on the leadership that a man allows in his life. For me, and I shared this in an earlier podcast, my relationship with God grew not really going to church. Church was there, but my relationship grew because I would study my Bible 2 hours a day, just reading, and I would put myself in any situation that was in that study. So if it was talking about Job having calamity, but trusting God and having faith. Right. So when it talked about Job going through XYZ, mentally I put myself in that situation and said, if Job could do it, I can do it.
You can do it. That's what they're there. They're examples for us to lead our lives.
So if we're afraid to pick that Bible up and read it for ourselves and eat what's in there, there will be no spiritual nourishment. Yeah. And without that spiritual nourishment, you can't grow. I see men all day. They eat protein. They lift weights. They'll get in the gym for hours. They'll get physically strong, but then they're spiritually weak.
Right.
How do we show a man, or how do we represent manhood and say it's nothing wrong with being in relationship with God?
Oh yeah, definitely nothing wrong with it. I feel like you're a stronger person anyway and know where you're going when you have that spiritual connection with God. So I know you brought it up a few times, just the things that could have happened if you weren't in a relationship, right? The things that could have happened, the ways you could have went in different situations, if you didn't have some type of calmness, some type of level-headedness, right, that you get from that connection. It's like, yeah, I need that, that spirit to talk to me and say, hey, don't do that in this moment right now. Don't do that. I think that's a big piece, right? Just having that relationship, talking with them so that you have that calmness, that peacefulness, and then you can hit any type of situation because we've seen it. Right. We have examples of it, all the time. People, being able to go different ways, think different ways, do different things. That is not of you. It's because of your relationship that you were able to get through that situation.
Right. Right. And so let's bring up Joshua. Mm-hmm. What was Joshua's assignment? What was his purpose?
Lead the children into the promised land.
He picked up where Moses fell. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Jesus picked up where Adam fell. Mm-hmm. God gave Joshua an assignment, and it's really one person in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that I can really say did 100% what God wanted him to do. There was a part where he said there's still more land that needs to be taken, but for the most part, he did exactly. And he got a double blessing. He got a blessing above any and everybody. And I want to talk on that, Minister Carlton, about the assignment and why it's important to complete the assignment. And then I'll share why my assignment was important for me to complete it. And Errol, you can share if you feel like you want to share.
I mean, when we look at assignments, for me, the perspective of it, concept of it and thought of it is really based on you having a job to do and you don't know the timeline of it. You don't know how long you have to get it done.
Right.
And if we are operating in any thought of what God has created us for, our purpose, back to that word, should always be to leave this world empty.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But how do we do that? And what does that look like? And that again is back to the connection of understanding the spiritual walk and having some form of connecting to God, because God will reveal to you, glimpse, never all this, the entire story, of course, glimpse of your assignment. But also the thing is that we tend to operate in something that we feel better about. And that can be even something in the form of career. Perfect example with me, my first, life career was in technology, but it was me operating in, hey, I see the money and I see people being blessed and they have the car and they have this and that. But in the operation of me doing that, I found what my purpose was and was actually teaching,
right,
training. So now that I'm actually operating in that, I would say, gift and purpose, God is showing me so many other things, including my call to ministry, which is another, journey of it, because my entire life I had some form of connection with a spiritual ride.
Right.
I was raised in Islam from the age of 3, and I say up until about 16, 17, and that's when I started to figure, hey, there's something else going on out in this world other than just what we're doing as Muslims. And I had all of my friends actually were Christians or some form of, raised in a Christian home or whatever. So when I started to tap into what was else out there, I found the spiritual connection that I never had as a Muslim when I sought after Jesus. And when I did that, it showed me again another level of the spiritual walk that I always somewhat had, because I just felt like there was a spiritual connection that I always had anyway. But knowing that now the trueness of what my spiritual connection is, it started to give me different perspective of as a man, but also as a individual in this world. And again, operating in what I thought was me when it was coming to the technology, when it came to how I did things with family and that nature, and even my wife and the kids, it just was not in alignment of what God had me do.
Right.
So for me, again, it's just a sense of wanting to make sure that I am leaving this world completely empty. And when I say empty, I'm not saying nothing else in me to do, but nothing else left to do.
Right.
That God has said, and even and we always kind of say, well, he died at a young age, or they died at a young age, but we have to look at what they did
right
when they were here.
Yeah.
And that's the key. And I always praise God for the assignment of what was done, and what was done in a sense of, hey, they left empty.
Right.
And I want, again, whatever age God feels as though it's time for me to come home, I want him to say, job well done, because the job was done. And that's the way I see that process.
So when we talk about this process and being in relationship with God, God will say, hey, I want you to build a house. But he only gives you wood. What's your next step?
He's put some other type of assistance out there.
He's gonna put some other, but you got to go back to him,
right,
and say, all right, you gave me the wood. Where do I get the nails? Where do I get the glue? How do you want me to build this? And it's a perpetual walk with him, because other than creation, there are not too many things that didn't follow what we can call evolution, or a process of getting done what God calls you to do.
Right.
In that process, he'll give you wood. He may give you nails. He may give you a chariot, but it's your job to go back to God. And then when you find out that you have an assignment, like he said, I thought my assignment was technology. I thought my assignment was being a barber. That was part of my purpose. That was my gift. Now being 51, and I shared with you last week, my whole everything has really turned in a 180 degree circle. Like Carlton just said, I was in this, I was seeing this, and now I'm seeing a whole totally different purpose. We had this conversation last week. I never thought I would not be cutting hair 5 days a week in the barbershop. I haven't cut in the barbershop 5 days a week in about 10 years.
Yeah. Did you say
But what's before me now? Ministry, other business ideas. We're finna launch our barbecue.
Oh man, I can't wait. Be first in line. Okay. So let me know.
I'm taking my food preparation class right now, so I can learn how to. And again, these are gifts that He's already put inside of me that will make more money than barbering could ever make.
Right.
I can bring my family into it. Everybody in my family likes to cook.
Right.
Everybody can't be the barber that I was.
Right.
But to do a food truck, to do start out, our goal is to have a restaurant. Our goal is to do parties for couples and things of that nature. I mean, it's so far-fetched from what I thought
it was going to be.
My life was going to be.
But if you look at that and just visualizing the connection that's all of that has, is when you look at yourself as a barber, what were you doing? You were ministering in a sense, but it was ministering in a sense of bringing people to a conversation.
Right.
And what does having a restaurant do? What does having these podcasts do?
Yeah.
And that's, again, bringing people to a conversation, bringing people to and let's be realistic, in a barbershop, well, 100%, you feel safe to express
who you are,
and what you're going through. So if we take away the barbershop, men don't have that in a sense. And that's why something like this, and even other things that, God is doing with all of us, obviously, brings that level of, it's not always has to be getting my hair cut to be able to express, hey, brother, I need help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the fact that I heard you talking to him help me.
Right.
And that's the thing, and since we got people listening and brothers listening, that's something that we're pushing. Have a conversation. Be open to have that conversation, because
be vulnerable.
When you look at, again, your gift, it was connected what you thought your purpose was in a sense, but it presented yourself. And again, back to what you said about the wood, you got to go back to God and have a conversation.
Yeah.
But what is that about? And that is about God saying, I always want you to need me.
Yep. But
you have to seek me.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. That's the word right there, the seeking part in everything. And he says, seek first the kingdom of God and all of his righteousness, and all else shall be added unto you. And that's where a lot of, all of us fail, is with seeking God in everything.
Continuously seeking God.
Continuously.
Because we get in that mindset that
we got it under control.
I can handle this. I got the wood. Now I'm just going to figure out how to make it work and not think about the nails. Right? Because God didn't give us the nails.
He didn't give us nails. Yeah.
So I'm saying, okay, God, you must want me to do this some kind of geometrically thing where I fit things together and all of that, and it's supposed to work. But then God says,
no, I'm sending somebody. I'm sending somebody with the nails. I need you right here.
I just need you to ask. I just need you to ask.
Or we do the Moses. I'm not equipped to build this.
Right.
Or I don't know how to build this, so I'm not even going to try.
Well, that's the thing is the conversation that we're having as men right now, and my wife is here, that we have in the barbershop, we have on the basketball court.
Right.
We need to turn that into a conversation with God. And you said it. You talked about it a couple weeks ago, prayer and learning how to pray and learning how to talk and learning how to speak to God. It's no formality in that. It's, and I'll be honest with you, for me, Lord, I can't take this. I can't do this. And then God will be like, all right, so I'll give you an example. 2014, 2015, 2016, I'm tired. I'm hurt. I'm been in car accidents. I'm struggling. And I'm like, Lord, I want to retire. I don't want to cut hair anymore.
Right.
And all I heard was, well, you need to buy some more clippers.
I'm not done yet.
You're not done yet.
Well, let me hop in here real quick because you said a couple of things, and Mr. Carlton, you said the same thing. So, do you think your assignment can change?
Oh yeah.
And I want to pull that out then, because that's what I heard. Right? It wasn't at the time, hey, I need to be all the businesses and do this, or at the time technology didn't help you get to where you're supposed to go, but at the time that was your assignment, possibly, right?
Well, I don't want to say change, let's say evolve
or
develop.
Yeah.
Because, or can you have multiple assignments?
You can.
There you go.
Like I shared last week, and I talked about me in my barbering industry, the principles and structures that I set up, being the barber that I am, that transitioned me over to opening this warehouse that I operate in, and what's coming from the warehouse. The food truck is now coming from the warehouse.
Yep.
You understand what I'm saying? So I was not expecting for God to give me a warehouse.
Right.
And I was never expecting to start a food truck. But what did barbering do? Barbering opened those doors. The family God gave me opened the gifts of trying different recipes and doing different things and allowing you to taste that piece of meat.
In the barber chair.
In the barber chair. And so we want to let men know that for me, the relationship with God really was
still key.
It was key in not just my barbershop, but me affecting the barbershop. God changed me, and then he said, "Now I need your barbershop to change. No more cursing, no more regular TV, no more whatever." And it was the most difficult thing in the world because when you're in the streets, you want your street cred.
Yeah, exactly.
But I wasn't worried about my street cred. I was worried about, I want to do exactly what God is calling me to do. So I had to make a decision whether I was going to be the Craig in the streets or the Craig that God was calling me to be.
Right.
And we're talking 1997. It's 2024 and I haven't stopped.
Right. I will say, if you were giving bad haircuts, though, nobody would be in your shop. So.
And you wouldn't have
they were
that
going to
meat.
listen to the gospel all day to get that
Exactly. You
haircut.
get that good haircut.
And that meat.
Well, honestly, if I did not give good haircuts, I wouldn't have my 2 co-hosts.
Right.
And I probably wouldn't have the wife that I have right now because it was all orchestrated by God.
It was.
I had to walk through the barbershop, through the woods while I'm sitting there looking at the trees. I had to figure out how was I going to turn this into I'm not saying it was a Christian shop. We just weren't the typical street.
Oh, yeah. Right.
We didn't allow cursing. We didn't allow profanity. We didn't allow guys to hang out. I had Bloods and Crips sitting in my barbershop at the same time, having a peaceable conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Where do you hear that at?
Only where you get a good haircut.
Right.
He's trying to get that discount.
he didn't already got it.
But I mean, you also got to look at it in the sense of if you go back to just the worldly concepts of people or even men. That's specific. Yeah, obviously we're dealing straight with that. The one thing that I always love hearing is that you were that as a man growing up, if you saw someone who was streetwise as well as business wise, then that was like a strong brother.
Right.
Because he was able to understand how to maneuver through the streets and he was able to maneuver with the suit and tie.
Right. Right.
And that's the same concept with ministry. You have to be able to wear the spiritual mindset, but also have the understanding of the world concept.
Well, I actually think that's where ministry is going now. And I'm going to tell you why. We have set ministers up to be perfect, and they're not perfect.
Exactly.
Right.
And I'm going to be honest with you. If God ever calls me to be a pastor or a preacher, I do not want to be the one that people put on a pedestal because I'm not perfect. I don't want to be put in a sense of perfect. I want to let people know, look, I get up and struggle every morning, just like you. I give it to God. I'm going to be me. And I'll share with you this. David Mann, Mr. Brown, and his wife, and they really don't know this. Very key to me really understanding who I am and who I need to be as a minister and as the person that I am. I am very funny. I love to laugh. I like to make people laugh. That's a gift that I have. But I didn't know where to put that funny attribute in where God was calling me to be as a minister, because in ministry, these men have stood up and said, you got to be holy, you got to be this, you got to do blah, 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 blah.
And there's a seriousness when it comes to ministry.
Yeah.
Well, I was sitting there, I was watching David Mann, and I've worked with him for about almost 18 years now. And I'm watching his wife, and I'm watching him be Mr. Brown, and I'm watching him with Tamala, and they laughing and playing, and then I see him ministering like at the same time. And I was like, this is Mr. Brown ministering to somebody in the Mr. Brown character. Now, he don't know that I was watching him. He does not know that I was in my mind trying to figure out, where do I put these attributes that I have?
Right.
And it hit me. You don't put them nowhere. You use exactly what I've given you.
Exactly. Yep. You're gifted.
Be yourself.
To be myself.
Right.
And not that I didn't want to be myself. Identity, I didn't know what myself was supposed to be.
Right.
And so I can still be the minister that I am today. I can still do comedy. I can still be the funny guy. I can still be the barber. I can still just be who I am.
Right.
And that's what I learned about me and my purpose is. And let's go back to it. In my barbershop, I did not have to say God, Jesus, or the church to minister to this young generation of kids who were looking for identity, exception, and direction at the same time. How do you feed 5,000 people with 5 fish and 5 loaves of bread? It was the miracle that God was doing in me, and I had to be a willing vessel and say, all right, God, what do I need to do? I had to go back to him. And he said, he took me to the scripture. Worship me in spirit and in truth. And he said, when you tell them the truth, it's going to come back to you. So when I gave them the truth, so they would come to me, hey, Craig, what you think about blah, 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 blah. Bruh, don't do that. Because if you, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to tell you what happened. One of my clients was a tax preparer. And all these guys ran in a group. And one dude said, hey, man, such and such did my taxes. I got $42,000 back. So the next guy came in, the next guy came in, the next guy came in, the guy, and they were like, Craig, you gonna do it? Nope. I don't play with God and I don't play with the IRS. 4 years later, all of them tax bills.
Yeah.
They got the money up front, but didn't take the responsibility, didn't understand the responsibility that came along with that. And then all of them had problems. And I told them, don't do it.
Did it.
They did it.
Yeah. Figured that one out.
I don't like owing my wife.
Yeah.
I don't play with certain principles, and when it comes to like my business licenses, my registration on my cars, my insurance, I will make sure that those bills are paid before I eat. Yeah. And let me tell you why. I can always find something to eat. Might not be what I want, maybe rice and noodles. But if I know my responsibility is taken care of, that's peace to me.
You're right.
He is not lying. That's good. Telling the truth.
So for men out there, you have to operate within some principles or some directives or some guidelines, some morals, but you have to know that going back to God through Christ will get you to the places that you want to be. David, Adam, what would the conversation be if Adam went to God and said, hey, yo, God, the snake was talking to my wife?
Yep. That's not my responsibility.
Was that his failure not to communicate with God?
Not to seek God.
David.
He was out of assignment.
It was David, same thing.
Yeah, out of assignment. Yeah.
So when you out of assignment, there are things that are going to hit you and challenge you to be back in relationship with God.
Right.
So for me, my purpose, and we talked about this last week, is not to do to my wife and children what was done to me. My assignment was to fast, stop dating for a year, be celibate, let God process me so that I can marry the woman he had for me and show her something different from what she saw growing up and also what she dealt with in her dating life.
Right.
Now, what came along with that? I had a bag. She had a bag. We both carried it. There were some insecurities that she came into the marriage with that I had to say, I'm not like that. I'm a product of that. And I don't want what I went through for my kids to go through it and for you to go through what I saw. So that was my assignment. That was my purpose, to be the man that my grandfather and my father couldn't be.
Right.
And it was challenging. I found out last week that this generational curse that I thought was coming from my dad that I've been fighting was also coming from my grandfather on my mother's side also. Oh, yeah. So after the conversation, I went to my wife and I was like, I'm thinking I'm fighting a double generational curse.
Oh yeah, that's how it runs. Yeah.
She didn't understand it. I didn't understand. I'm 51 years old, and I'm this relationship is ever evolving. That I had a choice, and I don't know if Carlton. I had 3 dreams, and it was a dream of what my father did, dream of what my mother did, and the third night was a dream that if I did what both of them did, I would have the same things that they had. In the dream, I had 7 children by 7 different women if I did it the way my parents did it. And so it was horrifying to me because in the dream, I'm trying to figure out how I'm about to pay for all these kids.
Exactly.
And so the challenge was God was saying to me, you can have what you want, but this is going to be the effect. Or you can do it my way, and you're still going to have 7 children by 1 woman, and I'm gonna bless those children. I'm gonna bless your wife, and I'm gonna bless everything you do.
Right.
So I had a choice. Did I want? And I didn't, because my father was physically abusive. He was mentally abusive. He was verbally abusive. And do you see how beautiful that is? I never want. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He didn't take into consideration the effects that it had on his children.
Right.
I don't cheat on my wife, and it's not because of my wife. I don't cheat on my wife because I don't want to. So it starts with me.
Yeah.
And she benefits from the decisions that I choose to make, whether it affects her or not. My daughters, I knew what it was like when I saw my mother bust my father with another girl. I never want my daughters to feel like that. My dad let me down. I was very hurt because I felt betrayed by him. I never want my daughters to come home and say, Daddy, you cheated on me. So I had to make some decisions.
Right.
Men, you have to look in your DNA, your forefathers, your fathers and grandfathers, your mother, and see what challenges that they have that they are passing along to you. You may have to be the gatekeeper, the destroyer of yokes, the generational curse breaker in your family.
Right.
And that may be why you're having the challenges that you have today, is because God has given you an assignment and a purpose, not just for you. The purpose he gave me, the assignment, was not for me. It was for my wife and my kids to start a whole new generation that they don't know what it's like for their father not to be home.
Right.
Or to see their father with another woman. I'm 4 years old. I was like, wait a minute, that ain't my mama.
Sad.
But that speaks big time volumes, because we have to be purposely looking to break generational curses.
First, recognizing
recognize it definitely. But if we're not, if we're not intentionally trying or purposely trying to or going after breaking generational curses, it may skip us, even though we, obviously we're a product of the generation. Your father or my father did these, and then it may not be what you do, but if you're not intentionally breaking them or showing that they should be broken or can be broken, they may skip you and jump all over
keep going.
your next,
Exactly.
or even their next. And that's the thing that, Steve Harvey said it, I'm living my life to bless my grandchildren.
Right.
So that's the thing that we have to really pay attention to. It's not about me.
Right.
But it starts with me.
Right.
And if I'm not intentionally trying to break the generational curse, even if it is, again, like you said with your father, you see that. In my case, it was my mother.
Right.
And that's, a thing that I push. When my kids went away to college, I was like, whatever you do, stay in contact with your mother.
Right.
We're going to get connected.
Right.
I'm good. If you don't call me, I'm going to figure out how to hook up.
Right.
But I want you all to have that connection with your mother, because I didn't have it. So that was something that was like pushing for, again, the generational, and I would call it a curse because it happened even with her parents.
Right.
It was a disconnect.
Right.
But so it was like, okay, yeah, it has to, even if it doesn't affect me or it doesn't really resonate in my life, I still have to be intentional about breaking it, because I don't want to, my grandchildren to be affected.
Same thing with divorce. I don't ever want to be divorced.
Exactly.
So the life that I was living, I would have never gotten married or never had a substantially successful marriage if I didn't make those changes or those choices. So in conclusion, we need to understand our assignment. Men need to be able to go back to God. We need to be able to communicate with him.
Go get those nails.
We got to find those nails to build that house. Because what does a house represent? Protection.
Right.
So you read the Bible and structure. You read about the house of the Lord.
Right.
You read about the veil being torn when Jesus died. There was the holies of holies. That the structure of a man, the structure of his house, house really represents who the man is.
Right.
His home represents who he is. His structure, you know, I tell my kids, well, Daddy, you're too mean. I said, well, see that wall right there? That wall is very, very, very strong. It's to protect you from the elements outside.
Right.
You try to run over me, you might get away with it a few times. Try and run outside that wall. That's what doors are for.
Right. Yep.
So they don't want, men want it easy nowadays. Do you remember back in the day, you had to court a woman to date her? Now the women are courting the men. It's easy nowadays for men to get a woman, to get caught up in something that they may or may not understand what the circumstances are.
Yep.
And so the devaluing of a man in the streets, that's also crossed over to the man in the home. And even though they're two different men, they could be the same man. We have to have this conversation to let men know there's no good thing that's going to turn out while you're in the streets.
Right.
So if you want that successful life, it starts with you. It starts with your acceptance of who Christ is and really understanding who you are, not based on who you are today, but who you were before you were born. I lived a life of generational curses from my father and my grandfather before I realized I was doing the exact same thing that they were doing. It was just in the 1990s form.
Right.
And so God gave me those 3 dreams and said, okay, continue this. I got you.
I want to share one more thing, and you might can take this into the next session. The other thing I think is real important for men and leaders to keep in mind is that when you find your assignment, or when God reveals that to you, you also have to understand that Satan has an assignment. And his assignment is to combat God's assignment, or to prevent you from attaining and being successful in the assignment God has for you. So with that, he tries to distract you, or he tries to put temptations before you to get you to divert away from the assignment God has for you. That's why it's so important, you know, to seek God, because he's going to reveal and give you discernment of that, you know. So you got to keep in mind that assignment is not just you knowing your assignment, but also being aware that there's another assignment out there as well.
So we can use that example as David.
Yeah.
The Bible said that in this time, kings go to war, and he was in his bed chilling.
Yep. Not on assignment.
Not on assignment. Bathsheba would have never happened
Had he
been at war. So it's very important for us to understand that when God sets up a principle, when there's culture, godly culture, at that time kings went to war, that's where he should have been. That when you don't follow the culture of God, there is the second assignment, the assignment to kill, steal, and destroy. And what happened to David's seed? It was not destroyed, but his lineage was destroyed, all the kids. And even though Solomon, it was his job to take over the kingdom, what chaos did he bring into his life, into his kingdom, that did not have to be there if he was where he was supposed to be?
Right.
Men out there, find your assignment, and the chaos that's in your life will soonly start to diminish.
Yep.
It's not going to be a tomorrow thing, because you got to work at it. I'm not going to say perfecting. I'm still working on my assignment of being the man that God has called me to be. I still have boys, and they've seen me as the father. They now need to see me as the father, but also the friend. I'm not trying to be their friend, but there are some things that they're going to have to go out and figure out. Man, my daddy told me this when I was 5. I should have been listening. I'm 25 years old. So what do they have to do? They have to come back and say, hey, Dad, how do I fix this? How do I, you understand what I'm saying? So the assignment is ever evolving.
Yeah.
we had a great conversation today. I want to thank Minister Carlton for coming.
Yeah.
I want to thank my wife for being here. Both of your contributions were very enlightening and added a lot to our conversation. We didn't get to talk about Joshua that much, and we didn't talk about Jonah, but that's okay, because in this podcast, we want to be led by the Spirit. We want our conversation to be led by the Spirit. Again, not asking nobody to join my ministry. We're not asking anybody to come to our church. We're just having a conversation that men need to have. Right. And whether it's talking about building a house, whether it's talking about buying tennis shoes, or how to dress, or how to tie a tie, that's a conversation that needs to be had. Right. Whatever your religious background is, I support you in that. If that works for you, then so be it. I bless you. I'm just telling you from my lifestyle how being in relationship with God, or Jesus Christ, being a Christian, has really helped me evolve to be the man that I am today, which this conversation is nothing but a offcast of the conversations that I've had in barbershops since I started in the barbershop when I was 19. I'm 51 years old. Yep. So, great conversation.
Yeah, it was
definitely.
Great conversation. Great conversation. Do we want to pick up next week with Joshua?
I think so. Pick up.
Because we need to understand when God gives you an unction and an assignment, how it's not always completed in 10 days, in 2 years. Joshua had to continuously go into war and fight battles that God had already said was already theirs. Yeah, you got it.
Right.
So I think we need to add a little faith in there, and relationship, and understanding what a relationship with God looks like, because
and talking about choices too.
Yeah,
that's real important.
Yeah,
because everything is a choice when it comes to your relationship with God.
Well, it is the choice.
Right.
It is a choice. All right. So again, we're going to thank Seven Spring Studio for hosting the Men of Promise podcast, A Man's Conversation. We will be launching another podcast in the next few months. It's called the Women of Promise podcast. It's called The Woman's Conversation. So part of my wife coming here and being present is for her to hear a conversation that men have and are having to help her learn to moderate her own podcast. And, you know, we might want to invite you guys, wives, to come down here and maybe be a part of her podcast to see what they can help, you know, other women with in their relationship with God and what they go through with their family and being the women that they are today. And, you know, our goal and our purpose is to affect men today, but you have to look at your you have to look at your past. You have to be present. You have to be present with your past to understand where you may be going in the future. Yep. And even if you don't know where you're going, if you just deal with the past stuff, it will launch you it will walk you into your future. Right. Yep. So we're going to end this podcast today, and I want to say thank you for everybody that came. Anybody have any last comments?
No, just great job. Proud of you.
Thank you. Minister Carlton?
I'm blessed.
You blessed?
I'm good to go.
You're good to go?
This is great.
The Bishop in the booth?
Hey, you know I got a comment. Great job, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So look for the Promised Land International Ministries YouTube page is coming soon. We want you to subscribe. We want you to follow. We want you to share. If you know somebody who needs to hear this podcast or something was said that you can help somebody with, direct them to our channel, direct them to our page. We're praying for you. And we're hoping that you find that relationship with God just like we have had. And we pray that you begin to have the successes in your life that you're wishing to have and that God wants you to have. So with that, I'm going to say good night. We'll see you guys next week. Blessings.